this. Justice and Correctional Services Minister Ronald Lamola joins me now. Minister, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let's just talk about the correctional centres. We have 243 at the present moment. How have they been affected so far by COVID-19?
Yes, good morning, and good morning to the viewers. Indeed, it's an important and a necessary decision to allow for social distancing and, in certain extent, in our facilities, physical distancing, because we need proper circulation of oxygen in the cells. And we also need a situation where, when the need arises, for example, where one of the officials or inmates tests positive, we must at least have the capability of helping the Department of Health with testing the number of people who might have come into contact with that person. So when you have a huge number of overcrowding, it affects that kind of an operation. Using the Eastern Cape, East London as a facility, as an example, we had to test about 2,137 inmates. We also had to test about 1,069 officials. So the number in total is above 3,000 people that had to be tested in one facility, which is the East London facility. So you can imagine if we have this kind of a situation in the big centers like the Johannesburg area, which has got above 6,000 people, including Portsmouth and the Durban Westgate. So this decision by the President is helpful in our scenario, and due processes will be followed for each and every inmate.
Now, Minister, according to the Correctional Services Act, before granting offenders parole, they have to undergo an assessment and rehabilitation process. That's in the Act. Has that process taken place with these 19,000?
Yes, it has taken place. All inmates, as they arrive in our centers, they immediately go for risk profiling, and the process of rehabilitation does take place. But we will have remembered that after the Van Dijk case, we also identified some weaknesses in our processes, particularly with the individual risk, including the fact that we need to work very closely with the South African Police Service so that they know when someone is about to be considered for parole, to do a background check and also help us with certain relevant information. And we have said in this regard, that also needs to happen. In this period of 10 weeks, as the parole board visits across the country, they will need to ensure that that process is followed, and all minimum information that can help the parole board as they sit must be provided.
Now, Minister, we're reporting the DA is going to court to force government to make public all the minutes of the National Command Council. There's various bodies that are, threatening to go to court with various issues pertaining to the lockdown and the regulations themselves. We know you've created a COVID-19 dispute mediation process to avoid costly court cases. Tell us, how are you facing a lot of these, prospects of litigation and so forth, and has that mediation process actually started working?
Yes, that is a voluntary process, and we must thank the Arbitration Association of South Africa, who have also offered us their services, their facilities to be used, which we really appreciate, and we will use that. It's a voluntary process by anyone who feels they've got a dispute with the state on any matter relating to the regulation or related to COVID-19. So that, firstly, it should be at least cost-effective, it should be expeditiously handled, but also it also creates an avenue where not every dispute has to be resolved by the courts. But if the parties really feel strongly that their disputes can only be resolved by the court, their rights are not taken, they are still able to do so.
Minister, just lastly, just want to return back again just to the parolees. There's concern, obviously, that some of these parolees are going to come out, obviously, and some will go to homes where there's no food and so forth, and might immediately return back to their criminal ways. What's your take on that?
Yeah, indeed. You will remember that before we release them, they have got a startup that we ensure that at least they've got something of a start to start with. Because when they are in our facilities, they do some work in our farms, in our production plants, which give them some smaller amount, which when they are released, they are given as a startup. But secondly, this program is done through their social work in our facilities, but we also work with the Department of Social Development. So it's an integrated approach which helps to identify where there are gaps with regard to food, and those gaps we are able to, through that process, to close. So there are various mechanisms that are put in place to mitigate such kind of circumstances.
Minister, do we have an efficient parole system in place to ensure that these offenders or the parolees stick to the conditions?
Yes, the section of correctional supervision is responsible for monitoring all the parolees. It's responsible for ensuring that they comply with their conditions. And the stats, the majority of them do comply. But from time to time, you will have that small number of them or a fraction that get out and veer out of the way. And that is where we then revoke the parole. And sometimes it becomes unfortunate because some of them do commit heinous crimes, and those then give us a headache. And it's a challenge that we always look at improving our systems to ensure that the rehabilitation programs, as we work on them, must minimize such kind of behavior.
All right, Minister, thank you so much for speaking with us as Justice and Correctional Minister Ronald Lamola, talking to us today about the release of almost 19,000 inmates on parole.